My name is Cordelia Wintmore, and I'm 78 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened just 6 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. You see, sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Sometimes the daughter you raised, protected, and sacrificed everything for becomes a stranger who can't even remember to pick you up from the hospital. I was sitting in that sterile waiting room at Mercy General, clutching my discharge papers like they were winning lottery tickets. 3 days I'd been there after my hip surgery. 3 long days of staring at white walls and eating bland food that tasted like cardboard. But I didn't mind, because Vivian, my daughter, had promised she'd be there at 2 p.m. sharp to take me home. The clock on the wall ticked past 2:30, then 3, then 3:30. I watched other patients get wheeled out by loving family members, their faces bright with the joy of going home. The nurse, a sweet girl named Rebecca, kept checking on me. "Maybe she's stuck in traffic," she'd say, with that practiced smile nurses perfect over years of witnessing heartbreak. By 4 p.m., I knew something was wrong. Not wrong like an accident. Vivian would have called if there was an emergency. Wrong like she simply forgot. Forgot about her mother sitting alone in a hospital, waiting like a child forgotten at school pickup. The realization hit me harder than the fall that broke my hip in the first place. That's when I pulled out my phone, opened that Lyft app my grandson had taught me to use, and did something that would change everything. I ordered a ride home. Little did I know, that 20-minute drive would reveal secrets that had been festering in my family for years. But before I tell you what I discovered when I walked through my front door, I need you to know something. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt forgotten by the people who should love you most, please hit that subscribe button, because what happened next will shock you. And I want to make sure you don't miss a single detail of how I turned my heartbreak into the sweetest revenge. The Lyft driver was a man named Ezekiel, probably in his 60s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that told stories of hard work. As he helped me into a sedan, he noticed the hospital bracelet still around my wrist and the careful way I moved. "Hospital pickup?" he asked, gently, adjusting his rearview mirror to see me better. "Something like that," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I gave him my address on Maple Street, the house where I had lived for 43 years, where I had raised Vivian and her brother Marcus until cancer took him at 31. Ezekiel didn't pry, but as we drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook, he started talking about his own mother. "She's 84 now, lives with me and my wife," he said, stopping at a red light. "Every doctor's appointment, every grocery store run, every Sunday church service, we're there. Family isn't just about blood, ma'am. It's about showing up." His words hit me like a physical blow. Showing up. Such a simple concept that my own daughter seemed incapable of grasping. I stared out the window at the suburban landscape I'd known for decades, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. "You raised your children right," I told Ezekiel, my voice thick with emotion I was trying to contain. He caught my eyes in the mirror. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Whatever's happened, I'm sorry." As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed Vivian's silver BMW parked in front of my house. My heart leapt for a moment. Maybe she had remembered. Maybe she was waiting for me, worried sick. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Through my living room window, I could see figures moving around. Multiple people. In my house, without my permission. Ezekiel helped me out of the car and walked me to my front door. "You sure everything's all right, ma'am?" he asked, genuine concern etched on his weathered face. "I'm about to find out," I replied, fumbling for my house keys with trembling fingers. I stepped into my own home and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Vivian was there all right, but she wasn't alone. She was with her husband Derek, a real estate agent I'd never trusted, and 2 other people I didn't recognize, a woman in a crisp business suit and a man with a clipboard. They were measuring my living room. Measuring my living room like it was some property they were evaluating. Family photos that had sat on my mantle for decades were stacked in boxes. My late husband's favorite armchair, the one he had died in 5 years ago, had a yellow sticky note attached to it. "Mother!" Vivian jumped when she saw me, her face flushing red with what I hoped was shame but suspected was just irritation at being caught. "What are you doing here?" What was I doing in my own house? The question was so absurd, so insulting that I actually laughed. A bitter, hollow sound that echoed off the walls of the home I'd lived in longer than my daughter had been alive. I could ask you the same thing," I said, setting down my small overnight bag and trying to maintain my dignity despite the walker I was still using. "Who are these people, and why are they in my house?" The woman in the business suit stepped forward with that fake smile I'd learned to recognize from years of dealing with insurance companies and medical billing departments. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Linda Ashford from Prestige Property Solutions. Your daughter contacted us about a potential estate evaluation." Estate evaluation. The words hit me like ice water. In real estate speak, that meant they were getting ready to sell my house. My house. The house where I'd brought Vivian home from the hospital as a newborn, where I'd nursed my husband through his final illness, where every corner held memories they couldn't possibly understand. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "This is my house. I'm not dead yet, and I certainly didn't authorize any evaluation." Derek finally spoke up, his voice dripping with that condescending tone he had perfected over the years. "Cordelia, we need to be realistic here. You can't live alone anymore. Not after the fall, not at your age. We're just exploring options." Options? They were exploring options about my life, my future, my home, while I was lying in a hospital bed trusting them to care about my well-being. If you're watching this and thinking about your own elderly parents or grandparents, please pause for a moment and call them. Tell them you love them. Because what I discovered next about my daughter's plans will make your blood boil, and you'll understand why family loyalty can't be taken for granted. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you, get out of my house right now." But Vivian wasn't finished. She pulled out a manila folder that had been sitting on my kitchen table. My kitchen table, where I'd fed her breakfast every morning for 18 years before she went off to college and gradually forgot where she came from. "Mother, we need to talk about this," she said, opening the folder to reveal a stack of legal documents. "You're not being reasonable. Dr. Patterson said the fall was a warning sign. You need assisted living." Dr. Patterson said no such thing. He said I needed physical therapy and to be more careful, but my mind was as sharp as ever. I knew exactly what these documents were before she even spread them out on my table. Powers of attorney, guardianship papers, documents that would essentially make me a prisoner in my own life, with my daughter controlling every decision. "When did you have these drawn up?" I asked, picking up the top page with shaking hands. The date made my stomach drop. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, while I was still walking around perfectly fine, Vivian had gone to a lawyer and started the process of having me declared incompetent. The man with the clipboard, apparently the lawyer who drafted this betrayal, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore, these are just precautionary measures. Your daughter is concerned about your safety and your finances. With your permission, we can—" "I will never give you my permission," I interrupted, my voice rising to a volume that surprised even me. "This is fraud. This is elder abuse. This is my own daughter trying to steal my life from me when I'm lying helpless in a hospital bed." Vivian's mask finally slipped, and I saw the ugly truth underneath. "Mother, you're being dramatic. You fell and broke your hip. What if you died? What if you laid there for days? We can't take that risk anymore." But I knew this wasn't about risk. This was about the house. This was about my savings account. This was about the life insurance policy that would pay out more if I was in a nursing home spending down my assets than if I died peacefully in my own bed, surrounded by my own things. The only risk here, I said, standing up straighter than I had since my surgery, is me trusting my own daughter. Now get out, all of you, before I call the police. Linda Ashford and the lawyer practically ran for the door. Derek followed them, but not before shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. Only Vivian remained, standing in my living room like she belonged there more than I did. After the others left, Vivian and I stood facing each other in the living room, where I'd once rocked her to sleep during thunderstorms. The silence stretched between us like a chasm 40 years in the making. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Mother, you're making this harder than it needs to be. The Sunset Manor is beautiful. They have activities and medical care on site, and how long, Vivian?" Her shoulders sagged. "Since Daddy died, maybe before. You're 78 years old. You live alone in this big house. Derek and I have been talking about it for years." Years. While I was grieving my husband, while I was learning to live alone for the first time in my life, my daughter had been plotting to put me away like some inconvenient piece of furniture. "The only house is worth $800,000 now. Do you know what we could do with that money? Bridget needs college tuition, Derek's business needs capital, and you'll be taken care of." Bridget, my granddaughter, who was 17 and hadn't visited me in 2 years. Apparently, my life savings were more important to my family than I was. "You forgot to pick me up from the hospital," I said softly. "Your own mother, recovering from surgery, and you forgot." For the first time, Vivian looked genuinely ashamed. "I was meeting with the lawyer. The paperwork had to be filed today if we were going to—" She stopped, realizing she'd just confessed to the ultimate betrayal. The pieces fell into place like dominoes. She hadn't forgotten. She had deliberately left me there while she was across town signing papers to steal my independence. She'd planned for me to come home to a house already being evaluated, to legal documents already filed, to a done deal I couldn't fight. "You thought I'd be weak after surgery," I said, the realization dawning on me like a cold sunrise. "You thought I'd be grateful just to be home, too tired to fight, too confused to read the papers carefully." She finally looked me in the eye, and what I saw there broke my heart completely. There was no love, no concern, no guilt, just cold calculation and irritation that her plan wasn't working as smoothly as she had hoped. "Mother, you can't live here anymore. Accept that." But I was already accepting something entirely different. I was accepting that my daughter was gone. The little girl who used to make me macaroni necklaces for Mother's Day had been replaced by this stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her inheritance. What happens next will shock you, because sometimes when you're betrayed by the people who are supposed to love you most, you discover strength you never knew you had. Make sure you're subscribed because my revenge was so sweet, it'll restore your faith in justice. After Vivian left, I sat in my husband's chair, the one with the yellow sticky note that apparently marked it for removal, and I did something I hadn't done since my surgery. I got angry. Really, truly, bone-deep angry. I called my neighbor, Gladys Peterson, a retired paralegal who'd lived next door for 15 years. Within an hour, she was sitting at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee and a fire in her eyes that matched my own. "Elder abuse," she said flatly, after I told her everything. "Financial exploitation. Fraud. Honey, your daughter just committed about 6 felonies, and she did it with witnesses." Gladys helped me understand exactly what those legal documents meant. The powers of attorney hadn't been filed yet. They needed my signature or a court order. The guardianship papers required a competency hearing. Vivian had jumped the gun, probably assuming I'd be too weak or too grateful to fight back. But here's the thing, Gladys said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. She trespassed in your house today. She brought strangers into your home without permission. She admitted to deliberately abandoning you at the hospital. We've got her. Next, I called my grandson Tyler, Vivian's older son from her first marriage. He was 25, worked in IT, and had always been closer to me than to his stepfather, Derek. When I told him what his mother had done, the silence on the phone line lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Grandma Cordy," he said finally, using the nickname he'd called me since he was 3. "I'm coming over, right now, and I'm bringing my laptop." Tyler arrived within an hour, and what he told me made everything even worse. "Mom's been talking about this for months," he said, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "She even asked me to help her research nursing homes. I thought she was just being prepared, in case something happened." But it got worse. Tyler had overheard phone conversations between Vivian and Derek about my finances. They knew exactly how much money I had, my savings, my pension, my Social Security. They'd calculated down to the penny how much they'd inherit versus how much a nursing home would cost over time. "She said you were getting difficult," Tyler admitted, looking sick. "She said you were becoming forgetful and paranoid. I should have known she was lying. You're sharper than half the people I work with." As Tyler set up his laptop at my kitchen table, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. I wasn't a helpless old woman with no allies. I had Gladys with her legal knowledge, Tyler with his technical skills, and something Vivian had underestimated: a lifetime of connections in this community. "What exactly are we doing?" I asked as Tyler's fingers flew over the keyboard. He looked up at me with a grin that reminded me of his grandfather. "We're gathering evidence, Grandma, and then we're going to war." Over the next 3 days, we built a case that would have made Perry Mason proud. Tyler discovered that Vivian had been researching my financial situation for months, accessing accounts she had no legal right to see. She even called my doctor's office pretending to be me, trying to get information about my mental status. Gladys contacted her former colleagues in the legal community and found out that Vivian had consulted with 3 different law firms before finding one willing to help her. The first 2 had apparently told her that I was too mentally competent for guardianship proceedings to be successful. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ezekiel, my Lyft driver, called me. "Mrs. Whitmore, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I can't stop thinking about yesterday. Is everything all right?" When I told him what had happened, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Ma'am, I want you to know that I have a dash cam in my car. It records everything. If you need it for anything legal, I saved the footage from our trip." The footage showed me being helped from the hospital, clearly walking with assistance, but obviously mentally alert. It showed my shock and distress when I saw the strangers in my house. Most importantly, it had audio of my conversation with Ezekiel about family loyalty and showing up. Tyler also made another discovery that made my blood boil. He found text messages on an old phone Vivian had left at my house months ago. Messages between her and Derek discussing their timeline for getting me into managed care. The messages were chilling. "Once we get the house sold, we can afford that cabin in Colorado," Derek had written. "And the monthly fees will eat through her savings in about 3 years. Then insurance takes over." "What happens after insurance?" Vivian had replied. Derek's response was cold. "Medicaid facilities aren't our problem. By then, Bridge will be through college." They had calculated my death into their financial planning. My own daughter had reduced me to a line item in their budget, a problem to be managed until I was no longer their responsibility. But we found something else in those messages. References to other family members they'd already written off. Vivian's Aunt Dorothy, my sister, who was in a nursing home in Phoenix. They'd convinced her to sign over power of attorney 2 years ago, and now they controlled her finances too. "Grandma," Tyler said quietly, looking up from the laptop screen. I think Mom and Derek have done this before. I decided it was time to face my daughter directly. But this time, I wasn't going into battle alone. I arranged to meet Vivian at a restaurant downtown, neutral territory where she couldn't control the situation. I brought Gladys for moral support and Tyler for technical assistance. We arrived early and set up at a corner table where Tyler could discreetly record everything with his phone. When Vivian walked in, I barely recognized her. The mask of concerned daughter was gone, replaced by someone who looked annoyed and inconvenienced. Mother, I hope you had time to think about our conversation. The Sunset Manor has an opening next month. If we move quickly, I've had time to think. I've had time to think about a lot of things. Like how you forgot to pick me up from the hospital while you were meeting with lawyers. Like how you've been researching my finances without permission. Like how you've been planning to steal my house for years. Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. Tyler hasn't told you anything, but Tyler didn't tell me anything. I pulled out a folder of our own. The evidence told me. Your text messages with Derek, your unauthorized access to my bank accounts, your calls to my doctor pretending to be me. Vivian's composure finally cracked. You went through my phone? You went through my life. You calculated how long it would take for a nursing home to drain my savings. You planned my funeral expenses. You wrote me off like a bad investment. The restaurant was busy enough that other diners couldn't hear us, but I saw a few people glancing over as Vivian's voice rose. I was trying to protect you. I was trying to make sure you were taken care of. No, you were trying to take care of yourself. You and Derek and your plans for a cabin in Colorado paid for by selling my house and warehousing me until I die. I pulled out the printed text messages and spread them on the table like playing cards. Vivian's face went through a rainbow of emotions: shock, anger, fear, and finally, defeat. You don't understand, she whispered. Derek's business is failing. Bridget needs college money. The house is just sitting there while you rattle around in it alone. The house is my home, I said. My savings are my security. My life isn't a problem for you to solve or an asset for you to liquidate. Tyler leaned forward, his young face serious beyond his years. Mom, you committed fraud. You trespassed. You tried to steal Grandma's life while she was helpless in a hospital bed. For a moment, I thought Vivian might apologize. I thought there might be some spark of the daughter I'd raised, some recognition of how far she had fallen. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stood up. Fine, she said, her voice as cold as winter. Live in that house alone until you fall again. Fall and lie there for days because you're too stubborn to accept help. When you're dead, I'll get it anyway. She walked out of the restaurant without looking back, leaving me to stare after the stranger who used to be my little girl. But this isn't where the story ends, because sometimes when people show you who they really are, you have to believe them. And sometimes the best revenge is living well despite them. What I did next will surprise you, and I guarantee it's not what you'd expect. After Vivian walked out of that restaurant, I sat there for a few minutes feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Free from the guilt of disappointing a daughter who couldn't be satisfied. Free from the obligation to pretend our relationship was something it wasn't. Free to make my own choices about my own life. What now, Grandma? Tyler asked me. I smiled at him across the table. Now, we make some changes. The first change was legal. Gladys helped me find an attorney who specialized in elder rights. Not the kind that help families steal from their parents, but the kind that protect seniors from predatory children. Within a week, I had ironclad documents that ensured no one could ever again try to take control of my life or my assets without my explicit consent. The second change was financial. I met with my banker, a woman named Regina Thompson, who had been handling my accounts for 15 years. When I told her what had happened, she was horrified, but not surprised. Mrs. Whitmore, this happens more often than you'd think. Adult children who see their parents as assets instead of people. But you've got options. Regina helped me restructure everything. I set up a trust that would distribute my assets exactly as I wanted, with specific provisions that would prevent anyone from contesting my wishes. The house would go to Tyler, who actually cared about family history and memories. My savings would fund scholarships for students who, like Tyler, were studying to make the world better instead of just more profitable for themselves. But the sweetest revenge was what I did with my life. Instead of shrinking into fear and isolation, I expanded. I joined a hiking group for seniors. I volunteered at the literacy center where Tyler had learned to read as a struggling kindergartner. I traveled, something Robert and I had always planned to do, but kept putting off until someday.
I sent Vivian a Christmas card that first year with a photo of me standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, grinning like a teenager. The message inside was simple. Having a wonderful time. So glad I didn't let anyone put me away. Love, Mother. Today, 18 months after that terrible day at the hospital, I'm sitting in my living room, writing this story. The house is fuller now than it's been in years. Tyler moved into the apartment above my garage after he graduated and got a job with a tech company in the city. He pays rent, helps with maintenance, and most importantly, he shows up. Gladys comes over every Sunday for coffee and gossip. We've become the unofficial neighborhood watch, keeping an eye on the other elderly residents and making sure no one else falls victim to their own children's greed. I even reconnected with my sister Dorothy in Phoenix. It took 6 months and a lot of legal wrangling, but we managed to break the power of attorney Vivian had manipulated her into signing. Dorothy moved into a lovely senior community near her son in Oregon, and we talked twice a week. The hiking group turned into a close-knit family of its own. We call ourselves the Silver Striders, and we've tackled trails in 7 states. Last month, I completed a 5-mile hike through the Grand Canyon. At 79 years old, I'm in better shape than I was at 70. As for Vivian, she and Derek lost their house last year when his business finally collapsed. The last I heard, they were living in a rental, and Bridget was working part-time to help pay for community college. Tyler sees them occasionally and says they blame me for their financial problems. Apparently, my refusal to be their retirement plan has left them with the novel experience of having to support themselves. I don't take any pleasure in their struggles, but I don't feel guilty about them either. The money they were counting on was never theirs to begin with. The house they were planning to sell was never their inheritance to claim while I was still alive to live in it. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what would have happened if I'd been weaker, more trusting, more willing to believe that they knew what was best for me. I'd be in some sterile facility, watching my savings drain away while my daughter enjoyed my house and planned for my death. Instead, I'm here, in my own home, surrounded by people who chose to love me rather than people who felt obligated to tolerate me. The truth is, getting older doesn't mean becoming less valuable or less deserving of respect. It doesn't mean your children automatically know what's best for you, and it certainly doesn't mean you should surrender your autonomy to make their lives easier. I still use Lyft sometimes, and I always ask for Ezekiel when he's available. He never charges me full price, and he always asks about my adventures. You're living proof, he told me last week, that showing up for yourself is just as important as showing up for others. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to hear more stories about courage, family, and never giving up on yourself. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own strength. And remember, it's never too late to fight for the life you deserve. In the meantime, on the final screen, I'm leaving you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until now.